Hello and welcome back to Teppou Republic. On the last episode we saw Takahisa faced off against an enemy Swano army where we blocked each other's line of sight with a hill, and the lack of artillery meant we had to slowly close to close quarters. Luckily Takahisa had a load of snipers who was able to thin out the enemy's ranks before he advanced, allowing his men to overpower the enemy's melee heavy army. Then the Satsuma moved the force that landed in Kawachi to attack the castle at Ki. Unfortunately for them, they didn't bring any artillery and their force wasn't particularly good. They were quite quickly wiped out by the Wakayama garrison, one of many armies that these guys have held off at this particular location, so no surprises there. Then the Matsue sent forces to relieve the siege of Hokkaido. Unfortunately, the defenders inside didn't get involved in the battle. However, the enemy still had a pretty decent army. It was very melee focused, meaning it had to run across the entire battlefield taking artillery fire before it got to us, and in the end, none of them actually reached our line. But then, the Yongo defenders inside sallied out immediately after the end of that battle, so Kunimitsu had to lead another battle. This time the enemy had lots of missile units, but it was no good. They didn't have enough of them, and lost so many men setting up their position that when the line battle started, it very quickly resulted in a Sioux victory. Over in the east, Kodama teamed up with Yoshiyuji to capture Iwate province, and Tanenao took Aomori province, both from the Sendai, and both meaning that the eastern end of Honshu is now completely unified under the Sioux forces. Now let's continue. A week ago, I wouldn't have dared say there was anything to worry about, but having spoken with some of the other independent ministers, it turns out my secret fears were shared by all. And so I write to you today as a voice of a newly defined Kokkai bloc, a bloc without a name or goal other than to raise the signal of danger. You are likely aware of these issues yourself. The recent files of legislation seem too eager to overturn the de facto laws set in place by the Revolutionary Accord. Now, in the spirit of fairness, we are tempted to believe that this is simply because the true will of the people deviated slightly from the assumptions of those who penned the design of the new order, and that these changes are legitimate corrections in our course towards a more virtuous society. But there exist possible other motives, and the circumstances of the Kokkai beg for them to be explored. You likely noticed during your visits of a few weeks past that the majority of the Kokkai representatives are now former nobility, a huge swing from the rather more populist assembly of the previous year. I believe it is merely a case of those who desired power needing a little time to work out how their existing influence and wealth could be utilized to acquire it. So now our so-called People's Assembly is more akin to a coalition of feudal families, forming their own parties and blocs, and as I implied above, pushing the sort of regulations that they are familiar with, which unfortunately are rather unsavory for those of us who empathize more with the common people. I still entertain the possibility that I'm entirely wrong, but I will leave you with a warning from the combined minds of your revolutionary academics. Without strong action, the worst aspects of our new world will combine with the worst of the old, and the likely result is a folly that will disturb the balance of this peace we've worked so hard for, perhaps irreparably. Welcome back. It's right, we've destroyed all of the enemy forces in eastern Honshu, wiping out the Sendai Shogunal Vanguard, the most powerful of the shogunate clans, meaning this area is quite secure now, and we're now only 6 provinces away from complete victory. There are more shogunate provinces in the north, in Hokkaido to capture, and plenty more Imperial regions opposing us, so we're not totally safe, but if we can push on just a little bit more, total victory will be ours. So I'm going to start advancing. We've got lots of forces now ready to advance against the Imperials. I've got Takayuki and a reinforcement army coming up to guard Bizen against Hiroshima attack, and it's very likely he'll be able to just push on because the Hiroshima won't have too many forces left after recent defeats. Kunimitsu is able to instantly take Hokkaido, just a few Americans left defending the castle after he defeated the Yonago army that came out to sally against him in the previous episode. The capture of that castle actually means the Yonago clan are now completely wiped out as well. Another long-term enemy of the Sioux has been finally finished, and it's a very nice province indeed, very rich with some high-level buildings, although the use of high-level military buildings doesn't matter so much as my military is pretty much as powerful as it needs to be. So we will now secure these new areas and prepare to move on Izumo with Kunimitsu. Back in Setsu, the armies that were hanging around there are now all finally dispersing. The last one is now ready to move out. I wanted to move it to support the assault on Awaji, but it's going to take so long that I thought instead I'll move to the docks, build a ship, and then ship them over next time to help out. Another situation to deal with is Takahisa's defense of Mimasaka province, where the Suwano have once again moved forces in. It looks like they're trying to hide despite there being no forests, but we know they're there. So I'm combining my local forces together to attack. I engage the smaller group, which just runs away, leaving the bigger group to just stand there. So now I can engage the bigger group and the enemy will just have fewer forces to play with. Very useful for me. I can move up reinforcements there to make things even easier. So Takahisa engages. The balance bar is about even, but the enemy's army is the sort of one we've seen before. Loads of katana samurai, katana kachi I should say, a melee focused army that is going to have to just run across the battlefield, taking artillery fire and gunfire until it reaches our line. And Takahisa actually has some pretty good melee units himself, including a level 9 squad of Buddhist zealots with upgraded charge, certainly something to be reckoned with. So let's head down onto the field and see how things go. To begin with, I formed up with all of my melee infantry at the back of the army. Not a very good place considering the enemy have tons of melee troops, but I was going to reform later, just see what the enemy did to begin with. The opening phase of the battle, of course, will just be hitting them with some artillery. The enemy have a very deep and narrow formation, perfect for a shrapnel attack, and that's the first thing I do, really damaging the center of their army, and importantly, wiping out all of their artillery immediately. So we've gained ourselves artillery dominance of the battlefield straight off the bat, meaning the enemy won't be able to stop me at all from just bombarding them throughout their entire advance. The artillery there, the surviving gun, shattering off the field. I think they did have a couple more guns that also took damage, but they never set them up. So overall we are totally free to just keep hitting them as they advance, meaning they're not going to be in a good state when the real battle begins. When the survivors from the previous battle ran before the enemy were even in sight, I thought them traitors to the Emperor. Already I have sent runners to secure their execution should they ever return home. But now, the power of Su's foreign technique is seen. This is how that Takahisa, the man they call the Bear of Su, wins his battles, not with strategy but with the reign of terror from afar. We have heard so much of it, but to see it like this is something else. But we will not give up and betray the Emperor's faith so easily. All units must advance! As the enemy get a little closer, I start reforming my army, ready to receive them. That means moving my melee troops forward through the artillery's position. I thought the artillery wouldn't fire whilst my men were blocking them, but apparently not. They destroy two of my men, who miraculously get straight back up after taking a shell. I don't know if the shell went right through their bodies or it was just a blast knocking them over, but they heroically go straight back into the fight. True warriors. Anyway, the enemy's army is getting pretty close now. You can see a lot of its leading regiments are at less than half strength, having been bombarded the whole time by my parrot guns and howitzers there. But that's not going to stop them from having a go at our front line anyway. The balance bar already quite far in our favour as the main engagement begins. Our line opens up on the enemy's front line. The enemy were leading with archers, not the best line battling unit, especially because we have this giant numerical advantage in terms of ranged units. So whilst the enemy is still far away, we still have a massive advantage. The enemy's leading units getting cut down start to retreat already, and now their samurai will move up to the front and attempt to run across the open plain in front of my line to reach me. But of course, as they do that, their soldiers will be cut down. Very few of these samurai will make it, and when they do, they'll have to contend with my own melee units. So it's going to be very difficult for the enemy to break through the front of my army like this. They do have archers who are going to bombard some of my men but not do much damage, and they've got cavalry, another key unit, which they're not going to use particularly effectively, only doing frontal charges, which of course I can just counter by moving my spears out to drive them away, which I do here with the zealots and here with some Yari attendants, stopping the enemy's cavalry from getting near my vulnerable line, and they can now just gun them down at close range once they're busied fighting my spearmen. So we pretty much drive the enemy's cavalry away straight away. The enemy samurai do make it close to the line, then get caught up fighting with some stragglers from the spearmen, and are themselves gunned down at close range by my missile troops just slightly behind. So overall the enemy's army is very quickly routed. They only had a few ranged units who were destroyed almost immediately in an instant line battle once the enemy's melee units had been killed. You can see here how quickly my men are firing their high reload skill, and even these line infantry are totally pouring fire on the enemy's infantry as they attempt to escape this battlefield, dealing even more casualties to the enemy's already destroyed army. The battle hadn't quite ended because they had some wooden cannons to go and take out. I sent some cavalry to do the job in a loose formation. The cannons did target those cavalry and kill a number of the members of that squad, but according to this replay, time actually just froze before they reached the wooden cannons, which isn't truly accurate. You can see the cannons are busy firing my cavalry, and the shots that did kill some of my men are already airborne. But I guess you'll have to take it from me that we managed to win the battle from here on out without seeing the rest of the replay. So let's head back to the strategy map and see the actual result. It turns out we did win, with perfectly acceptable casualties as well. So that's the Swanu army pushed back, and I believe that since the Swanu only have one territory, that was probably the vast majority of their available forces, so we probably won't see much more trouble from the Swanu anytime soon. Just to really hammer that home, I'm going to send Takahisa forward to wipe out the survivors of that battle. This time the army that ran away from the initial engagement will get drawn in as reinforcements and be destroyed as well, and we also captured some of their howitzers, very nice. So that is probably the entire Swanu army wiped out. They may have more forces in their capital, but I doubt they really have the income to support a serious army other than that one, which was quite an expensive force. So we'll probably see them again because we won't be able to capture their territory before they build up an army, but for now we'll be safe from them. So the decision now was what to do with Takahisa. I could send him south to help with the attack there, or north to help with the attack on Izumo. I decided that in the south I'm probably going to have enough forces with Takayuki's group moving up. So Takahisa is going to move north to support Kunimitsu once again and take those reinforcements from Mimasaka with him, because I think Mimasaka is probably going to be safe for now. Moving on, the Satsuma army that we defeated in Ki moved south. It looks like it's going to raid some of the infrastructure in that province, which is annoying because I can't really stop them. The Sado force is also moving south, not attacking Echigo as I expected, and we saw there the Yonezawa landed their army in Ugo, so we're going to have to deal with that. Now going through the news at the start of the next turn, we learn that Takayuki has the opportunity to remarry. The problem is that this shrewish wife has some negative consequences for him as a general, so I decided that I wasn't going to allow him to marry this new prospective candidate. So we've got some more bad news. We've got agents being wounded, the invasion force landing, of course, sabotage, plenty of enemy agents rushing around our territory, and then some interesting news about Western economics. It seems we have the opportunity to focus our knowledge of Western economies either into increasing the yield of our economy or increasing its trade capacity. Now, because trade isn't actually a big part of my economy at the moment, and agriculture and mining really are, I was going to focus on that. So we're going to get some extra income for the foreseeable future as a result of that choice, which is very useful. Now also during the end turn sequence, some Imperial navies returned to resume terrorizing this area. You can see it looks like they've damaged the port there in Kawachi, but actually the port has full health. So I think that smoke rising off it just means it's being blockaded rather than it's being damaged. Luckily nearby, Murdoch is raiding some Imperial trade, which isn't terribly profitable at the moment because the Imperials have been on the decline, so I'm going to stop that raid and come back to just attack these Imperial ships. Previously I would make 1,000 plus cocoa a turn from raiding, now it's more like 100, so the Imperials' wealth has obviously declined a fair bit. I guess they've lost a lot of their trading ports because of my recent conquests. Anyway, those Imperial ships are wiped out pretty fast, obviously, and Murdoch can now link up with the ship I built in Setsu to form a new fleet which is going to carry this army towards the fighting on Awaji Island. Although actually I had second thoughts about that. I realised that Awaji is probably going to win itself without the presence of a second army, so what I could do is send this second stack ahead to actually go into Shikoku proper and start capturing our province there. And as long as it's not particularly heavily defended, that should be quite easy and make an easy crossing for the forces from Awaji to come over onto the island once they've finished up there. So next turn we'll see the continuation of that attack. The next attack to start is to move west from Bizen. There's more Hiroshima territory to move into. Takayuki is going to lead that attack with his newly trained army, a pretty powerful army at that, he's just about able to move up onto a bridge. We can see the Hiroshima have a full stack defending the castle, so I'm going to need to move up this second stack. At first, it looks like I can only get about halfway of my movement points, but we can use this little trick by moving the forces into Bizen and then back out again, which mysteriously doubles their movement range, allowing them to move all the way up to right behind Takayuki. This means if the Hiroshima do counterattack me in this position, I'll have two armies defending a river crossing, an ideal position, and if they don't, I'll be able to overwhelm them in a siege. Takahisa is going to fulfill the plan I mentioned earlier, moving north up towards Izumo province, where he is going to join up with Kunimitsu, who needs to move out of Hokkaido, leaving Mimasaka undefended, hopefully safely so for now. Kunimitsu is already ready to start the attack on Izumo, so he'll start moving out. So now we're really attacking quite heavily against the Imperial's battle lines. We've got 3 main thrusts into their territory, and hopefully soon we'll start to see some payout from these attacks. There's plenty of work in Nagasaki. Your uncle was there for years. Once the sale here is through, we'll get a few horses on loan and move everything over. It will take a few days at most. I will not have my children brought up under any villainous Sioux flag, not while there is still breath in my body and a world under heaven. Who can say they won't just blow this whole place up on their way in? Rebels are unpredictable, and that's the least offensive of their vices. So anyway, hurry this all up. I want everything packed before dusk. I shall away to the town to conclude the sale. Poor buggers don't know what they're in for. Now it's time to start the attack on Hokkaido. I'm piling Tanenao into this fleet, who's going to take him and his forces up towards the remaining shogunate territories on the next Japanese island. I know nothing about them whatsoever, so this is also something of a scouting mission. As I approach, I see 2 Matsume fleets sitting around, both tiny ones, so I decide to move up and engage them. So they're no trouble, but you can see there's also 2 stacks of Matsume troops standing on the coast as if waiting for this invasion. So it looks like this is a pretty bad place to actually land troops, because I'm going to be immediately attacked by a force that will outnumber me. You can see they have tons of expeditionary force. It seems they had plans to attack me with these guys, but never actually built the ships needed to move their armies over. So anyway, I wondered if I could dodge them and hit the castle straight away by landing somewhere on the shore north of the castle. But as I was looking around, it seems that all of this shore is just cliffs. There's nowhere I can actually land forces anywhere nearby. The only place that's anywhere near is actually way up in that bay, which will take me several turns to then walk down to the castle. Instead, I thought I'd check out a different castle, another one which looks like it's right next to the coast, so maybe next turn we'll find a more opportune place to land. There's also a Yonezawa ship nearby my remaining boat down here in Aomori, and I need to build up a fleet in order to move Yoshiuji up to support Tanenao. So I'm putting that boat into port, moving Yoshiuji up towards the port, and then I'll build more ships to try and defeat the Yonezawa there, so I can have a clear route up to reinforce Tanenao. Now, the Yonezawa's main army recently landed in Ugo, and Ugo is of course quite vulnerable to an attack by them. It's only got a few really low-level units inside it, not even a full stack garrison included. So the Yonezawa definitely have a chance to take that province back, which would be really annoying. Luckily, I still have Takemichi acting as a reserve in this theatre, so he can now move up towards Ugo to basically take it back the second the Yonezawa attack it, if that's what they are planning to do, and if they're planning to move south, just act as a blockade. Now back in the Western Theatre in Owaji Island, I was planning on attacking the castle and using my siege weapons, my artillery, to just level the castle, kill all of the defenders, and then send in my troops to capture it. This is something which will probably work and would have only minor casualties for me. In fact, I know that's true because I actually did fight this battle about 95% of the way through before the game just randomly crashed, and I didn't feel like doing it again. So instead, I'm going to besiege it now after I reloaded my save, and we'll just keep that siege going. There's no real time pressure to take Owaji. It would be nice to take it before the attack on Shikoku Island gets started. Now, moving back up to the east, in Echigo, we've got the Sado forces moving south. I don't know which province they're going for, but you can see I put some forces on a bridge to stop them going into Echigo if that is their plan. The Satsuma now land forces in Harima, annoying, and their forces in Ki attack my infrastructure as I expected, even more annoying. So the Satsuma are really disrupting my plans to invade Imperial territory, and Hiroshima are doing the same. A stack suddenly appears in Mimasaka. That means Takahisa is going to have to go back in that direction to deal with that situation. In Owaji, there's actually some good news in the fact that the enemy decided to sally out and attack my army, so it turns out it was a good idea not to bother assaulting the castle because the enemy were planning to come out and fight a field battle, where of course I have an even bigger advantage. The balance bar very far in my favour. A quick auto-resolve gets rid of the entire army of the Takasuki defenders, which means we capture Owaji, and that is the death of the Takasuki clan. A very long rivalry with our former ally there comes to an end. The Sado forces continued to move south, and the Yonezawa moved east, not attacking Ugo as I had feared, so that's actually quite useful. Now here in Iga, we can see there's tons of enemy agents just hanging around. They're constantly doing actions against Iga. I guess because it's my capital they give it some undue significance. I had a geisha inside and I decided to use her to try and enchant the lowest level of the enemy's agents, this foreign veteran, and it succeeds. So we've managed to gain an extra foreign veteran and get rid of one for the enemy, although the rest of the enemy's agents there are still good enough that that geisha is probably in serious trouble and is going to go quite soon. We can't see the Satsuma army that landed in Harima, which is quite annoying, but we can guess that it's probably going to go towards Setsu, or the capital, because that's where previous Satsuma landing forces have tried to move to. So I've got defences prepared in Setsu already. In Harima, I've got this stack which was going to go onto some trains. I decided to move them back towards the forest where the Satsuma must be hiding, so we can pursue the enemy wherever they move basically, so that should be a relatively safe situation. Now here with Takayuki's battlefront in Bichu, it's time to advance. There's this little Hiroshima stack just outside the castle which I want to get rid of first. I can use my second army to move up and push that stack away, meaning that Takayuki can now besiege the castle. Unfortunately, that stack and another are still within reinforcement range. The balance bar looks pretty even with both of my armies coming into the attack. So ideally I want to get rid of both of those armies outside the castle to make things a little bit more in our favour. Unfortunately, my second army can't quite reach the nearest of the two Hiroshima armies. I can move it pretty close though, and then because that army has a cavalry unit in it, the cavalry can move out to initiate a battle where the rest of the army will come in as reinforcements. And doing that now, you can see I get a giant advantage on the balance bar. The enemy just have a few units of varying quality, so it's going to be pretty quick to just wipe them out, and then the balance bar for the siege on the castle should be a bit better. Still not going to be good enough that I can actually assault, so I am going to maintain a siege here for now, but with 2 armies worth of artillery, it means I have a definite possibility of just leveling the castle completely using my artillery, and then attacking as I was going to do in Owaji with my remaining forces, who by then will have a massive advantage. Well, that is quite unexpected, but I'm not worried. No, I'm not worried at all, for that right there is a strategy that reveals how little they understand of our forces. They wish to go around the mountains and attack our supply line while we are invested here in Bichu. They will need this siege to last at least a month to see any real results, but there is scarcely a siege that lasts a week in the modern age. They clearly forget that we can crumble their fortresses down at our leisure, and with these new weapons, these Armstrong guns, we shall show them the true futility of castles and the new swiftness with which death can strike. So that Hiroshima army is quite the threat to Mimasaka province. Obviously they'd be able to take it if they wanted to. Luckily it turns out that Takahisa can get all the way back to engage them if he leaves behind some of his artillery, since his army already wasn't really at full strength. That's a little bit annoying to do, but it's worth doing anyway, because getting a chance to stop them before they can get inside the castle will make life a lot easier for us. So he's going to go into the attack. He still has 3 units of Parrot guns there, so it's not like he's going without artillery. We just don't have quite as much as usual, and will have fewer infantry than we could bring to the battle. The balance bar is clearly in the enemy's favour in this instance. The enemy has loads of Kisokachi, basically bow units that can hide, a high level bow unit. They've also got Katana Samurai, and they've even got some high level rifle units, the rifle attendants. So overall they've got a pretty good army. Ours really is worse, but I do have a lot of experience and superior equipment, which means mine should be able to still compete in a straight ranged engagement. The enemy has a melee advantage, although usually the AI doesn't use their melee advantage to their advantage, so we should be okay. So as the battle starts, I've set a pretty standard formation. Artillery guarded by 2 lines, the front line missile troops, the second line my melee infantry. I've also got some longer range troops, scouts and sharpshooters right on the edge of the main line. They're going to fire a few volleys as the battle starts and then go to harass the enemy on the flanks. The enemy are beginning their march towards us, and because of those Kitokashi being invisible, I can't really tell what their formation is, but I can still just bombard their general direction with shrapnel, which is cutting down a large number of their samurai. Very good. So already depleting their melee advantage. It's probably not even an advantage anymore, because we do have quite a lot of high-level spearmen among our own forces. So now the enemy must do the classic move of sprinting across the battlefield towards us. As they do so, their Kitokachi come out of hiding, and we can start to see the true formation they have and the extent to which they have a ranged advantage over us because of the sheer number of bows. But anyway, as the enemy get closer, the battle is about to begin. We killed a good number of them with artillery, and now sharpshooters will start doing their job as well, cutting down some of the enemy's lower level leading units there. The enemy are doing wide cavalry attacks on both of my flanks, which is quite nice of them. I'm going to have to fold my echelons on both flanks to receive them, which isn't going to be a huge deal because my melee units wouldn't have been doing anything anyway, so that's okay. My artillery continues to pound the enemy in the centre. Here on the right, I realise that my cavalry forces could actually just go and attack the enemy's cavalry. They have Yariki, I have Yariki, but I'm relying on my Yariki being a slightly higher level than the enemy's to win out in that engagement. Now the main line battle is starting to begin as the enemy's cavalry come into the left flank. That means arrows are starting to rain down on them as well. My zealots move out to attack these enemies' lighter cavalry, which should easily defeat them. They do have a samurai hero there as well, who actually will kill the vast majority of my zealots using their bows. Also using their bows are of course their main line, starting to rain arrows on my troops, who are just starting to fire back. In a ranged battle, the enemy does have an advantage, as I alluded to. Those bows are actually pretty good. So even though we are cutting down a good number of them, they'll be doing the same thing to us. They also have these rifle units, which of course can move in front of the bows and attack me at the same time as they use their archers to hit me, giving the enemy a nice double line effect so they can kill me very efficiently. The enemy's melee infantry have attempted their usual charge towards the centre of my formation, the vast majority of them being killed, but of course whilst my missile troops are firing at these guys, arrows are still raining down, meaning it's giving an extra opportunity for the enemy's missile units to inflict damage on my line. All the same, we need to get rid of those katana samurai, so I'm not going to change that situation. Some of them move up and actually do reach the line here, which is a bit annoying, especially for those carbine infantry. And here, the line is torn apart by a grenade attack by a squad of ninja that snuck right up in front of my line, then suddenly appeared, but since they appeared without any support, they were gunned down and most of them just run away, so they don't exploit the hole in my line they've made there. Now looking along the line, you can see a large number of Sioux bodies. We're really starting to thin out, going down to about a third strength, even among the melee units standing behind the line, which are being hit by the arrows as they spread out, going towards their targets. You can see here my carbine infantry just dropping like flies. The enemy's combined arrow and firearms attack really thinning my lines out. This isn't a very good situation actually. We've got down to the point very rapidly where it's probably actually about half our line only now alive and attempting to fire back at the enemy. And if you lose men too quickly, your forces will spend longer trying to reform to make a coherent formation than actually firing back, which makes things even worse. Speaking of even worse, friendly fire from artillery appears to be happening as well. I didn't notice that during the actual battle, but you can see in the replay. Apparently, we were firing at ourselves with the artillery, not very nice. So my infantry are in trouble. We've taken a lot of losses right along the line, as you can see, but the same thing has happened to the enemy. The balance bar is starting to swing in our favour, as now we can finally focus on taking out all those archers, and the sooner the better, because they're cutting my men down. Here on the left flank, my domain guard are having a hard time fighting the enemy's archers. They've lost so many men, and as an elite unit, that's really annoying. My Buddhist zealots, my elite melee unit, has lost most of their men as well. Really annoying. They were a level 9 unit that's been completely wiped out in this battle, fighting with enemies samurai and cavalry. But finally, as I actually started a cavalry rear attack on the enemy's formation, a decisive victory was declared as the enemy chain routed due to too many losses fighting this missile fight. So Takahisa's had a pretty rough battle there, but in the end, that important victory means that Mimasaka is safe. The downside, of course, is that we now have to replenish our forces for a long time, blunting our attack on the Imperials, but we'll see what we can do next time. So that's all for now, thanks for watching. We'll push on towards that approaching victory next time on Teppou Republic.